emotive, if I may say, because we've seen interesting developments in the country and actually across Africa of corporate innovation centers coming up. Then somehow things happen and we don't hear anything about them again. But that's a discussion that we're going to have. Why does this happen? Have we seen any successes in other places, and what lessons can we learn from those who've succeeded? And also, what lessons have we learned from those who have failed? Because we get actually some people tell me that it's not about failure; it's about lessons. So I'm going to take that positive attitude towards this. So I have an amazing, amazing, amazing panel. Like people who've been there, done that, and bought a t-shirt. Some of them have wounds, some of them have scars, others have gotten over it and are doing amazing things. So yeah, we will learn a lot because we have an amazing panel. And I want to take this opportunity to actually welcome my panel, and I will give them a minute each to just introduce themselves. Just tell us who you are, what you do, where you're doing what you're doing, your involvement in innovation centers, if any. Then we'll take it on from there. So I'll start. I'm looking at my screen. So I'll start with Wangari because she's right next to me, or so I'm seeing her as next to me. So we'll start with Wangari. So Wangari, just give us your, introduce yourself nicely so that people know who you are and why you're even in this panel to begin with. Wangari, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you, Harry. I hope everyone can hear me. So my name is Wangari Stewart. I'm currently working at a startup, healthcare startup called MyShemeds. So MyShemeds focuses on incentivizing patients for good behavior. So like you can imagine, 80% of like our patients go through a pharmacy. So what happens like now with COVID, like people go to the pharmacy and say, hey, I have COVID. And we all know the list of drugs you should take, it's Mosdax, and then there's vitamin C. So it's actually telling them, hey, first do the test. And then if you are positive, you can take the specific medications to manage it. So we're looking at like, COVID, family planning, malaria, HIV. So yeah, that's currently where I'm at the moment. Why I am here? So I guess my journey in innovation started from like my first job. That was straight out of uni. I went into like a research organization called CSIRO in Perth, Western Australia. And I started off as an engineer, working with researchers. Experimentation, being agile, being innovative is their bread and butter. So I did that. I loved it. I was working with like geospatial engineers, hydrologists, so water, earth sciences, and building like web feature services. And then shortly after that, I moved into like higher education, so like a university. Again, just building systems, products, very much in a agile, iterative, experimentational way. And then I kind of felt like in my career, I want to get into the corporate space. I want that on that power suit because it kind of feels like serious to be in like the corporate space. So I moved into my first bank. So this was, it's called Bankwest of Australia. And they were going through this agile transformation. So I was like, wow, what is this? Sounds big. And when I got in there, I'm like, well, this is kind of what we use in research and science. It's experimenting, build, learn, and coming back, that whole cycle. So yeah, it was amazing. And then in 2018, I just decided to kind of shift gear and move back home. And I led up iCube, which is the digital innovation unit in I&M Bank. And that was great. Like, it was really great. Like, I love the idea of building teams from the ground, bringing in processes, really trying to be like innovative. And innovation can work. For me, like 3 steps to doing it is just make sure you're agile. For me, agility is a must. And agile does not mean going faster. That is not what agile means. There are so many, like, sorry to use this word, but quacks like in the continent who speak agile, but they're not really agile. So it's going agile, value to customer, and always measure, because if you don't measure, you can't manage it. So yeah, and apart from that, I'll just do a quick plug. I'm a content creator. I have a YouTube channel called 9 to 5 with Wangari. because I believe employee and employer relationships are like the second deepest relationship. So really
I'll stop you there. I'll stop you there, Wangari. I'll stop you there. I can see you're about to plug something else.
No, that's it. I'm done. Over to Ali.
Cool. Cool. So next is Kamal. Kamal, just take 1 minute, so that we manage our time properly. Go ahead, Kamal.
I'm Kamal Bhattacharya. I am currently the Vice Rector and responsible for research and transfer at IU International University, which is one of Germany's largest university. I haven't been back to Kenya in the last 2 years now, of course, with travel and all, but looking forward to re-engage both here and then with something really cool that I'm starting with a well-known friend of all of us, but more on that maybe in a few months.
Thanks, Kamal. I've never forgotten when you did a demo for me of Bonga. And I think that was going to be game changing. But anyway, that's a story for another day.
We'll talk about that later, probably.
Okay. Ali?
Good afternoon, everyone. Super great to be here today. Ali Hussein Kasim is my name. Actually, sometimes I get confused what I do. So my business card just says Ali Hussein Kasim, entrepreneur. I am in the tech space. I've been there for the last 20 plus years. Sit on several boards together with Harry. We are at the Kenya National Innovation Agency, where we sit on the technical committee. What keeps me busy every day today is two of the startups I'm involved in. One of them is called Kipochi, that we are building a digital banking ecosystem for the region, for Africa. So it's quite, you're not going to see much about us, but there's lots of work going on underground. The other one is supply chain platform, which is sort of integrated into Kipochi for payments, called Dukare. Dukare is currently focused on the FMCG sector. We have 70 manufacturers on our platform. You probably have never heard of us, but 60% of all wheat and maize flour that is sold in this country passes through our platform. We like to keep it underground. We have probably about 50,000 plus Dukas in our ecosystem. And last but not least, I've been in this space, as I said, for 20 plus years. One of the earliest employees of 3 Mice Interactive Media, which is without doubt one of the earliest tech startups in this region. I sit on the board of Longhorn Publishers also, and we are deep in the innovation space for EdTech. Love to talk about that and some of the challenges and some of the wins that we have faced today. So thanks, Harry. Over back to you. Super excited to be here today.
Thanks, Ali. And now, Grace, just introduce yourself quickly.
Thank you, Harry. My name is Grace Vihenda. I'm currently the Innovation Hub lead at Kenya Airways. And before that, I've held also different positions that have required me to apply a lot of innovation in strategy and special projects, continuous improvement, and also engineering. And generally, the subject around innovation is very dear to me. And so I am very excited to be on this panel in terms of just looking at also sharing my own experiences in terms of what I've seen work, what I've seen not work, and also getting to learn from the rest of the panelists and participants in this webinar. Thank you, Harry.
Excellent. And, we need to bring our pride back. So we're fully
Yes,
behind you. Okay.
thank
So
you.
so there are two other panelists that we're expecting. That's Eddie in this show, and Jack Ngare. I don't know. They'll join us at some point. So we still expect them. But moving on, very swiftly. I go and start. So I'll give my panelists about 5 minutes.
Sorry, Eddie's here.
Oh, there you are. Okay, please introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi everyone, and thanks for the time and thanks for the consideration to have this chat. Nice to see you again, Harry, and everyone else. Some of you I know of you, but I don't think we've met in person. But my name is Eddie Ndishu. I'm the co-founder and CEO of WapiPay, a parent company of Wapi Capital. We do quite a number of things. We'll talk a bit more about that later. But we're trying to build a global remittance business out of Africa, focusing on Asia and looking largely at the outbound model. My innovation career started a long time ago, back in Bamburi Lafarge, building a mobile service for them as an innovation lead, and then moving into banking. Did quite a number of things in innovation in banking, from Standard Chartered, built their channels, to KCB with the mobile services, KCB M-Pesa, and I think Okoa M-Pesa or now Fuliza. And into the internet business, Opera News, Opera Software, building new platforms like Opera News, Opay, Okash, and now seeking my entrepreneurial career in an opportunity to allow money to move a lot faster in and out of Africa.
Excellent, Eddie. Thank you for that intro, and congratulations on the raise, by the way. We see it.
No, we have to make some noise. I think the West is taking too much of the attention. I think there's some amazing. That's what Wapi Capital focuses on. There's some amazing innovations and startups, and one of the best things you can do for a startup is funding to make the idea a reality. Every innovation needs a strong support. But thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so I think I'll start with you, Eddie. And it's straight into the topic of today. Can internal corporate innovation centers succeed in Kenya? I want to expand this to Africa. Can they? And if they can, how? Because we've seen quite a number of false starts, and people have different reasons for those false. But can this happen? Can they succeed?
5 minutes. Wow, that's too long. To answer your question directly, I'd say yes and no together. That now that you've opened up the scope into Africa, but I'll focus more on Kenya in my own personal experience. In the corporates that I've worked for, the small ones, and into the well-established ones. I've been fortunate to work for very established organizations, very structured organizations. The concept of an idea, or how an idea comes about, is to attempt to make a change or to change how things are being done in the first place. And I'm not an ideas man. I'm mostly an executionist, and execution is where I thrive. And to answer your question, yes, they can thrive. An innovation center can thrive within an organization. Execution is always the challenge. And no, because it all matters on how, again, you execute, how you implement. I've had some experience implementing within a structured organization, and trying to bring everyone together to see that we need to change how we do things, how we deliver our products, our services. And there could be some, great idea. How do you capture that idea and carry it all the way to delivery, and actually realizing the value that it can give consumers or your customers, and the value it can give a business in terms of return. And then I've had the opportunity of going, okay, this organization is way too big. I remember my leader, was very persistent about, when I was at KCB, you will not be able to change this animal. You need to go outside the bank and try and create this new business. And then once you create this new business, it thrives on ideas, it thrives on new products, it thrives on testing new things. And eventually it grows and grows bigger than the old one and then pulls the old one in. When I said before, it's really about execution. Within the organization, you will find, if you're not structured well to implement the idea, you will find that you will struggle largely with the lower to middle management. When you go outside and attempt to do this from outside, you will struggle with the senior management and the board. And neither struggle is easy or hard, but you've got to find your operating rhythm within the organization, because every organization is not structured the same. Culture is a very significant aspect on how you implement a product. But even more exciting is telling the story, telling the narrative. We were able to tell the narrative on a number of products until we fulfilled, with a fantastic team, we fulfilled the results, and the results were amazing. And everyone wants to be part of a success story. Once you are successful, everyone quickly jumps on and wants to be part of it. The challenge is the people who are part of creating that success story and that innovation kind of want to hold it to themselves. But actually, it's not yours to keep. It's yours to share, and you share in that success and you offer it to everyone. If you ask some of the products I built in banking, everyone will tell you, I built this. Not me, Eddie, but their department built this. But that is, the intention was not for holding the innovation and the success, but and being able to communicate that effectively. The intention was to create success for the organization, and everyone in that organization is part of that organization. Getting into that rhythm is what's a struggle. I hope my 5 minutes is up.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting text. So internal struggles, and actually, I think there's a saying that says success has many fathers. Is it fathers or mothers? But yeah.
Fathers.
Yeah. Okay, interesting tech there. So let's go to Ali. Ali, what's your comment on this? And building on Eddie's points.
So I think there are a number of things. Number one, culture. Innovation is not about technology. You can rest assured that whatever you think about is potentially possible, if not today, in the next few months or few years. The problem comes in how we appreciate and understand innovation and what comes out of innovation in Africa. As we were having our initial practice chat, Harry, I was just looking at some of the reports globally around innovation. So, for example, in the global stage in Europe and in the US, the way most of these big tech organizations look at innovation is completely different. Number one, they create internal venture capital groups. So Google, for example, has Google Ventures, GV, Salesforce, Intel, Samsung, Qualcomm, Lenovo. All of these guys have billions of dollars invested in innovation. And guess what? Nobody asks them in a quarterly board meeting or ESCO meeting, what have you done? What have you achieved? Because they take a long-term view. We need to start thinking like that. Locally, what you find is that plays, even in organizations that I have been involved in, guys are starting to think, what's the cash flow projection for the innovation products that's come out? I mean, better not invest, because this is not a short-term thing. What happens is that a lot of the ideas get incorporated into the day-to-day. I don't want to mention banks, for example, in this country. But let me guarantee you one thing, and Teddy can tell me whether I'm wrong. I mean, Eddie can tell me whether I'm wrong or right. Some of these banks today have 90% plus of transactions on mobile phone. 90% plus. Yet, what happens? The innovation arms, and I'm not just talking about banks, I'm talking about telcos. I'm looking at Kamal. Where you find that the product and the ideas get incorporated into the day-to-day plays of these huge organizations from a Kenyan perspective. And yet they don't think that that's contribution from the innovation arms. So then guys get hammered on a quarterly basis. And if a guy says, but guys, have we not just completely transformed how these organizations look at customers? How do you value that? How do you value that? So I'll give you one very interesting example from a global perspective. And these are the learnings that we need to look at the local perspective. Because remember one thing, we keep on saying things like TIA, this is Africa. So it's almost like we are not supposed to be world class. I've got news for everyone. We are supposed to be world class. So if you look at Google Maps, for example, Harry, that's a 10-year project. 10 years of doing nothing else but investing, hundreds of engineers. Today, Google Maps revenue is averaging about $4 billion every year and growing. Just API pings, that's the value of innovation. I have served as a board member at Longhorn this is my 7th year now. If I'm not careful, I'm going to start being amortized like furniture. And that tells you that it's probably time to start, if I have not added value in the next 2 years, then really, what the hell am I doing? So what we've done at Longhorn, and this is driven at the board level, and this is alluding to what Eddie has said, if you don't have buy-in at that level, you're going to struggle. Simple, you're going to struggle. So Longhorn has a long-term strategy. EdTech is our play. Yeah, we don't want pesky startups to come in and start eating our lunch. Oh, it's not going to happen. Not on my watch.
So let me bring you back a bit. Sorry, let me bring you back a bit. So if I understand you well, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying corporate innovation centers can succeed in Kenya if there's buy-in from the highest level in the business. There's also funding into the different innovations that are coming out of the centers, and there's also there's patience in terms of guys are given time to be able.
Not, for example, define performance of a startup, of an innovation startup within a corporate, the same way you define performance at the mothership. What you're going to be doing is basically you're going to starve that child of mama's breast milk. And mama's breast milk is the corporate. So consider this, look at it from this analogy. Your mother, when you are breastfeeding, 3 months down the line is like, ay bwana, umekunywa ya kutosha bwana. Toka sasa ukajitafutie. What is going to happen to that baby? Your guess is as good as mine, Harry. So we need to take a view that innovation is something that we need to infuse completely into the organization.
Excellent.
That's one. To remove money from the balance sheet and say, this is the innovation fund, which is not, you define the metrics and you confirm with the board. Let me assure you one thing. If you have no buy-in from the board, it's going to be something like, it's nice to have. We have an innovation hub. Every so often we see Eddie with an earring, and
Yes, I wanted to look at this question and sort of look at what is going on in your workplace, and the ongoings there, and you I think you're the freshest in this, getting involved in this kind of things. So just give us your perspective, and then we can learn from that.
All right, just to start, I would really like to resonate with what Eddie spoke about earlier in terms of execution. You can do all the planning you want and have all these wonderful, superfluous ideas, but if you cannot just put a pen on the paper and then the rubber meeting the road and truly there's implementation that is successful, then you'll find that the Innovation Hub is considered redundant. And rightly so, because we want to see results at the Innovation Hub and not stories and, this, what Ali was saying, flower girl kind of narrative. Yeah. So I really wanted to reiterate that, as well as what Ali mentioned around the metrics. Some of the metrics that we can have at the Innovation Hub can really choke it instead of causing it to grow. And onto that, I would like to add that I think that when the mother unit is so focused on competition rather than collaboration, it becomes very hard to innovate. Yeah, because innovation is about collaboration, working with the ecosystem, integrating, and that working with the ecosystem includes working with competition, which sometimes is not very palatable or agreeable by the, let me use Ali's words, by the mother. Yeah, so I think that is an element that is key for an innovation hub to thrive. It has to be willing to collaborate with the ecosystem and everybody who would help it succeed, and not look at competition as enemies, but really finding creative and innovative ways of collaborating. This would mean maybe acquiring other organizations or just working with them, whatever that would look like. But I feel that, and I think, and I know that collaboration is very big on, innovation is very big on collaboration. And if you miss it in how you design the hub from the start, then it can actually collapse. The other thing I would like to add is that I do think that innovation objectives need to be tied to overall company goals. Because in that way, if that doesn't happen, it means that the mother company will feel like the innovation hub is not meeting its needs, like there's no point of convergence. So really what is key is, as much as we want the innovation unit to be autonomous, we want the innovation unit to be able to be allowed some level of flexibility. There needs to be a golden thread that ties in what the innovation unit is doing to the objectives of the mother company. Otherwise, the mother company will always think that the innovation unit is, a thing that they don't understand, or where money is wasted. Yeah, so there needs to be that alignment, a point of convergence between the innovation agenda and their corporate objectives. Then the other thing I would also like to mention, I think either Eddie or Ali had mentioned before, is just involving employees. I think that, and I've seen it before, where the people in the innovation unit are considered the innovators of the company, And so it's almost like an absolute where the rest of the staff feel that I am not part of that club, so I am not an innovator. But I think it's really critical that the innovation culture is driven all the way from the top to the shop floor in a manner that helps staff to see themselves as innovators. That means that the innovation unit becomes a facilitator of innovation within the company, rather than the people who are the ones who are innovating. I don't know if you're getting what I mean, Harry. Whereby the innovation hub is a facilitator of innovation in the corporate, as opposed to they are the ones who come up with those wonderful superfluous ideas that now everybody has to adopt and sell and facilitate. I don't know if my 5 minutes are up.
Yep.
They're up.
Yeah, they're up. But if you have another point, I can allow you to.
All right. Then also, I think that in some ways, we underestimate the power and importance of incremental innovation, whereby you find the innovation hub is so focused on the big things, the very big things that would require a lot of money and a lot of investment. And we forget that there's little incremental things that we can also do over time that could bring a big difference or a big change or result into that very big innovation that we are thinking about. So there's that thinking where the leadership team would be expecting that you come up with those things that are completely disruptive, those really huge ideas. That is what the leadership team is expecting.
Big audacious.
Yes, and yes, the big, hairy, audacious goals. Yeah, so sometimes, actually, most of the time, innovation does not come in that big, hairy, audacious goal, but in the little things that we do every day that lead, that whereby now we find ourselves in the big, hairy, audacious goal over time. So those are the points I will mention at this point. There's more, but I think we'll keep engaging as we go.
Very, very, very insightful. Very insightful. And I'm already starting to see some pattern here where actually there could be a problem, because you see there's an issue of execution. So you need to be able to execute, but then there's the issue of patience. So and if you don't execute in good time, then you become a problem. Because all of a sudden now the business or the corporate sees they're just pouring money into this unit that is just having fun and having shiny toys, and showing off the new things that are not bringing in any revenue into the business. And this is where now I bring in Kamal. Kamal, what's your take on this?
See, I want to pick up on a couple of things. The first one is, so Ali mentioned something that resonated, very much with me, and I want to maybe take it a step forward. Ask yourself what, if I were the CEO of a large company, and I struggle with the fact that, that I feel we're nailing it in all of the already well-defined revenue streams. We're making profit, we're getting better operational, but you can already see the signs that something is happening out there. And I'm not sure that in 10 years from now, even beyond my tenure, my company is still going to do as well. What are you going to do? I'm telling you exactly what I would do. I would hire a bunch of outsiders who will create tons of tension in the company. I call it an innovation center, and I don't actually really care about the success of those individuals. Because as a CEO of a large company, I have stockholders, or maybe even if I'm private, I have lots of things to respond to. And, if it works out with the guy or the girl, then I'm happy, but chances are you have a bet that it's going to fail. Now, I want to redefine failure, and this is sort of piggybacking on the point that Ali made earlier. But is it really a failure? Because you achieved what you wanted to achieve. You created tension in the organization that clearly communicated to everyone that I don't think as an organization, we are doing enough to eventually sort of address whatever competitive, the change in the environments, right? So what happens though, and this is the challenge with innovation and with innovators, I've been sort of in the space, I was fortunate enough to be in the space from my very early 20s onwards, and for a variety of reasons, but, and I'm not my 20s anymore. I don't know if you've noticed. Right. So and so one of the things that I've always noticed, right, is this, when you think that your idea is unique, then you're fooling yourself. Whenever you had a thought, always remember somebody else most likely had it before you. In fact, if nobody had the thought before you, most likely it's crap. Just discard it, because it may not be actually the right thing to think about, right? So you actually want to be in good company. And then, of course, you need to, as Eddie said also, then, execution is really important. Can you actually make it fly, right? But think about it this way. So let's say you have this idea, you have this innovation center that is now creating tension, and you talk about a lot of things. And you show a lot of things. You show little demos and you say, look, this is the direction that we should go. This is where the company should go. Other people will come and say, yeah, I've been thinking about this as well. This might be a good direction. And they may actually end up being the ones who are going to really carry it out. It may not be you. And people will maybe coming back to you and saying, you know what, you innovation guys, I don't think you've contributed anything. Well, what you really contributed is you started to let innovation diffuse into the system. Now, personally, right, and, I somehow managed to get myself into these jobs all the time, right, where I know that part of my role is to kind of create institutional infrastructure, or initiate institutional infrastructure, or create tension that I don't particularly care about. Will this become part of my legacy? Who cares? When I'm dead, I couldn't care less, right? So until then, well, I think there is a beauty in this. So coming back to my earlier point, if I were the CEO, and I throw somebody like myself into the mix and say, hey, you know what, don't change, right? Be who you are, right? Be gracious and courageous, which is what Bob Collymore always used to tell me, right? And at the same time, when you've created enough tension, that innovation then has enough pressure to diffuse to the system, and people will pick it up, and they may pick up your ideas, they may pick up the things your team is developing. That's good enough for the corporation. Put yourself in the shoes of the CEO. Do you really care if it's that guy or that girl to succeed, or do you want your company to succeed? As a CEO, you are responsible for the success of your company. You have to take care of your shareholders, of your investors. That's where your loyalties lie, right? So I think innovation centers are a great idea. They're good in whatever way you do, whether they look from the people who evaluate them as failures. I think they're looking at the wrong metrics. They're looking at, what exactly is it that you produce, how much money you make. That's just nonsense, right? What you need to look at, did an innovation center create enough tension that you can see the diffusion of ideas into the system that helps the company at some time change, even if you don't follow the precedents and you never give anyone credit. So as somebody in those roles, and as I said, I've been in these roles many times, in some ways, even at my university, I have a similar role right now. You have to embrace that, right? You have to remove yourself personally from the fact that, nobody was going to give you credit for it. It's okay, because at the end of the day, I'm drawing a salary, right? I'm getting the money that I need to support my family from the corporation. So I work for the corporation as well. If you're an entrepreneur, which I'm also, then, you have a very different perspective. But when you're at that point, when you have to make those decisions, always remember your company comes first.
Very interesting perspective there, Kamal. But I think I want to come back to you like immediately, because you see these tensions that we want to create in the business so that you can get things going, aren't they the same tensions that cause friction between now the innovation center and the business, so to speak, and then everybody is now fighting to make sure that that innovation center has to be closed?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Look, I mean, oftentimes it has to do with personalities as well, right? I mean, you know, it's there's a mix of these things. One thing is, you know, you can have people who are, you know, smoother than me and nicer than me, who can run innovation centers in an amazingly better way than I can, right? You know, you can have people who know how to work their way through. I'm not sure that they will always create that amount of tension that you sometimes need to release pressure and to diffuse innovation into the system, and so let me maybe simplify this a little bit, Harry. I think, and I believe actually, even when we talked about Bonga a long time back, we spoke about this point as well. You know, I personally believe that friction, without tension, there's no innovation. If you think that if you let all the flowers bloom and everyone sits there and is happy, that something will come out of there, that's nonsense, right? And I'm not talking about you have to have a toxic work environment, right? What I'm talking about is that you have to be edgy, right? You cannot make everyone happy and still be innovative. So the friction is something you need to live with, you know, until you can't, of course, because it wears you down. Trust me. And, you know, it's you know, at some point you have to you know, cut the cords and just say, okay, you know what, screw this. I had enough. But you should do this if you're honest to yourself. You should do this at a point where you think, okay, you know what, it's enough pressure that built up, and you will see that will happen. And somehow, recent times when I obviously keenly follow all the good stuff that's happening, you know, back in Nairobi and in Kenya, I'm proving my point right.
Yes.
At least what my, you know, when it comes to my previous employer, who, by the way, just for the record, I love. I'm very, very fond of Safaricom. I still think they're the greatest thing ever. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong.
Great. Thanks for that, Kamal. Now, Wangari, building on what all the other speakers have talked about, what's your take on this?
For me, it's like a definite yes, but I think there's one aspect that, like, especially in the banking space, our regulator, we need to think about them when we're innovating. I know, for instance, when I was working at the bank, my time at the bank, there needs to be a little bit more focus to kind of bring them up to speed with like what innovation is, what it looks like. You know, we don't even have like an innovative like sandbox in the regulator space. So yeah, I think that's another very important piece in helping big corporates to be like really good innovators. And it's not like, it's actually not even a fair playing ground, you know, like people like Safaricom have it better than the different banks. So it's just like, there's a lot of unfairness, and that actually does not breed like a great place to be an innovator. And this is just speaking from experience. And I've done innovation both within the continent, outside. You can't really compare how it looks like. But yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that my panelists mentioned, especially around delivery and how we're executing. I'm a big believer of executing with a really good agile process, like really understanding the process of building, testing, taking your product to the market really quickly and learning from that and being able to like show value to the customer. Because if you're not adding any value to the customer, then you're actually doing it wrong. And also having like metrics that are very clear, and your metrics can change. And this is, again, corporates don't think about this, but your metrics can change like every quarter if you're really innovative. Like, for example, when you're starting like your innovation management, you can put a metric like how many experiments have you put in for this quarter? How many of them have actually gone from idea stage to actually execution? How many of them failed? Where is the log for all the lessons learned? Have we learned from those lessons? What have we created from those lessons? What are our customers saying? But I definitely feel like it's 100% possible to build innovation centers. This idea of like creating tension, I kind of agree that, you do need, I always say you can't really package chaos. And that's the life of the startup. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of, we have to make money like right now. Let's figure it out. Let's iterate, innovate really quickly. And corporates kind of like that. Yeah, you can cause tension, but it just causes like politics and just, it can end up quite toxic. So I'm a big fan, like give an example like N26 Monzo. If they felt that they could build like a neobank in the banks that they were working in, I'm pretty sure they would have gone with that strategy, but they were like, I'm out, I'm going to build a bank outside the big corporate and yeah, just get done with it. So that's my take to whether big corporates can embrace like innovation.
Okay, so actually back to you. So I'm thinking, because you see, we've talked about many things, and where we feel things can happen and not happen, what causes different things. But then, if we're to say, dig in a bit and say, what are what are the two key reasons, Billy, that actually cause failure in corporate innovation initiatives would be? What are the two things?
To me, it's so legacy people and legacy culture. So
just explain that to me. Explain that to me like a 2-year-old.
Okay, so in terms of I can give an example for kids. Like kids are very agile in the way they think. Like in terms of if they have a new idea, they'll quickly think about it, create it, come to you. If they fail, it's okay, I'll cry, but I'll move on to the next. So culture to me, like if I give an example of a bank, because that's my experience, banks are bureaucratic, but they have their reason for the bureaucracy. Like they are bureaucratic because they're dealing with people's money. So it's really important to have a lot of processes in place. And innovation comes in and we say we want to innovate around like, the signing process and make it super innovative. But there's also like security concerns that you need to think about. But it's like working with operations and understanding innovation is just not technology. It's also looking at a process and figuring out, is this process, do we need to go through all these steps? Can we actually reduce the steps? And yeah, it's just that shift and that mindset in terms of culture that, and it's also understanding the culture that you're coming into. Is it a space that I can innovate really quickly? Banking, it's difficult. It is possible, but it is difficult. It's never linear. There's always going to be the ups and the downs and the ups and the downs. And then in terms of technology, I mean, you see it like, startups are they know how to architecture like good tech. Unfortunately, banks are quite ancient and the tech is usually you need a lot of work to kind of rebuild it, bring in like microservices and just make it super simple. Yeah, so for me, it's just those two things, culture being one of the top ones and just looking at the technology.
Okay. So Eddie, I want to bring you back to the discussion, and I want us to be real. We need to be real. So I want to ask you a very direct question. Why do you think the initiative at KCB failed, and what would you have done differently?
I don't know what do you mean by failure. I'll go back to what Kamal said. Is it really failure? And I really agree with this idea of friction or chaos. The point of an organization, and especially when you're sitting at leadership, is you want the organization to be, 10x successful, or at least exist for the next 20, 30 years in the next decade, and that will be your legacy. So when I think about innovation, that could either happen within the organization or outside the organization, where you bring in strategies like building outside the core, etc. Now, you'd be very surprised. You would think that the guys outside are the ones who are going to be creating amazing products and it will be successful. But it ends up creating enough friction to motivate the core to actually start to transform and change itself. I wouldn't say it's failed. I would say it's taking much longer than it should have. But remember, our motivation then to create that initiative and create a, as a different subsidiary company, etc., was really to get the board to stop thinking about thinking beyond M-Pesa, to be very honest, thinking beyond mobile money, thinking beyond everything is can be done by a telco. Years before that, I was involved in setting up an MVNO. But the idea is, what we're trying to do with the initiative is to create aspiration and the thinking of what can be possible and what could be possible. Because the challenge with the corporate is that they're used to what they currently do. But you've got to transpose that thinking into, oh, wow, we could actually do this. So I spent a lot of time with the board, and like what Ali says, the board can be rough, but we managed to get a whole chunk of money from the company, flew to Shenzhen, bought the same G2R2 M-Pesa platform from Huawei, and we were the first bank in East Africa. And part of what motivated that, and at least that approval, was very many things. I don't want to get into the politics of it, but the fact that we had a successful product within the organization that got people thinking, wow, hang on, we could actually do something amazing, something that we never thought we could. I remember when we were firing up KCB M-Pesa, the bank had only about 4 million customers in over 100 years. 2 years into KCB M-Pesa, we have 10 million customers. And, that's a success story. You go back to the leadership and to everyone else and tell the story and create that aspiration. And even with any innovation or initiative that you create, you've got to put them in a map and say, okay, innovation is not one big product, one big bang. It's a momentum. And it's a momentum of successes. And you pick one success after the other, and you pick which one is fastest and what will get you to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. I do believe the challenge and the delay in the initiative is that the core started sucking, as Ali would call it, the baby back in, right? And that's largely leadership. When you as a leader, you've got to decide at what point was this a bad decision, at what point was this a good decision, right? But you've got to stick to the decision you make. But what happens is, whatever initiative now seems to be successful, and it looks like these guys are going to run away with it, with these 10 million customers, the organization starts pulling you back in. And that's okay. Remember the objective. You want to have a successful organization, right? And that innovation needs momentum. It needs aspiration. If you see what Kamal did over at Safaricom with Dr. Shiko, and I know Ali likes picking on me, you've got to create that figure, and it needs to be the CEO, that figure of aspiration that look at this amazing thing these guys can be able to do, and everyone rallies up. It's part of leadership, and it needs strong personality, it needs that capability. But with innovation, I don't think there's failures, Kamal said. I think there's a transposing of perception in what your organization is all about and what your organization can do. Remember at the beginning I said, you've got to understand the culture of that organization. You can either do it from within, or that organization culture is completely horrible. It needs to be done from outside. But either way you do it, and whichever side makes the innovation does not matter. Look at what they ended up with. They ended up with $1 billion platform that could really do as amazing as M-Pesa. The question now is execution. And that's the challenge. But in the meantime, that was the big idea and the big innovation. But you've got these other small things like what we were trying to do with Oko M-Pesa or Fuliza now. It wasn't a brilliant idea in the sense that it's new, like mobile money when mobile money came out. The challenge was that we were struggling with our ratios, and we were not funding enough to be able to give out as much loans as we were. So we had to be creative about how then do you fund customers and bring down the ratios and be able to collect those funds back a lot faster, a lot easier. And the concept of turning a credit card, putting a credit card onto mobile money is what popped up. And the long or the short, it was a very noble idea, which we didn't think, okay, it will fix the product case of M-Pesa, and we'll get our ratios doing a lot better. But it ended up being a lot bigger than what we anticipated. But that's the thing, and the point is execution. So I don't think Vuma has failed. I don't think the initiative has failed. I think the bank now thinks about new possibilities. The bank now thinks differently about banking, about the core business, as it were. More so, as Ali says, to have that many transactions on mobile, to have that many customers acquired digitally. The concept of fintech. I remember when we brought Brett King, people never understood what the hell is fintech. But banks have had technology the whole time. So why do you call it financial technology? I mean, we have a core banking system, et cetera, and banking is very different, right? To say your internet business. And when you look at the case of Opera Software and how they do innovation, it's complete chaos theory. So you have guys in Norway, guys in Sweden, guys in Beijing, guys in Australia, a small team that we created in Africa, guys in the US, and they're all doing their own stuff. They're doing their own stuff. It's chaotic, and you feel so disfranchised. You say, I thought we're part of one organization, but these guys are building crypto browsers. These guys are busy building mobile money platform. These guys are building OPay. These guys are building Opera News. These guys it's complete chaos. And what happens is that rhythm of that chaos, eventually the churn of products that come out, and you have a center of leadership that is able to take those products to market and realize them for what they are. So it gets success in innovation is not one or zero, right? It's what did you get out of it and that experience, and then the decisions you make, especially as leaders, to continue with that momentum.
Yeah. So it's not binary. It's not okay. And I like the fact that you bring in the whole concept of the leadership, and also what Kamal brought out of it's a business. You're looking at it's one business. You want it to succeed, so that should be the rallying call, so to speak. But I think a lot of the time it's never the rallying call, because there's too many interests in these organizations and these activities. So and I think that's where the tension comes in. So Kamal, do you feel you created enough tension at Safaricom, and would you say that that's why Alpha was shut down?
I'm not sure whether there is a causality. Whether I created so much tension that Safaricom. No, I don't think so. Look, I mean, we have to also look a little bit on the circumstances, which weren't particularly great, right? The whole sort of Alpha concept and all was it wasn't my idea, by the way, right? It was Bob's idea, right? He approached me to ask me if this is something that can be done, and we actually went around this for months. To be frank, right? I was out of IBM. I was already at the iHub, and we spent, quite a few months kind of going forth and back on how this could exactly look like. And I had some concerns with sort of the structure that, he was pursuing, but I already at that time, I had some again, you put yourself into his shoes and you're trying to see what it is that he wants to achieve, and that was meaningful. And so, was I expecting to survive for 3 years to do something like this and kind of make it? Not really, right? And as I said, even then I wasn't in my 20s anymore. But do I think that it created a sufficient amount of ideas and sort of inspirations towards, what could be done if we do it right? Absolutely, yes. I'm pretty confident about that. I think, the team had done a tremendous job in coming up with things that I thought, even now, 2 years later, that haven't been picked up yet. But when I look at sort of the global ecosystem of startup ideas or things that are coming out into the market, that a lot of things that we've sort of invented at Alpha are not even done yet, are not even thought through yet. There could be a lot more breakthroughs from these things. So was it, but, there are a couple of things that, we need to add also to, the great things that Eddie said, right? The one thing is, of course, look, was I the right choice for that innovation center? While Bob was there, I had a very good relationship with him, and I really enjoyed working with him because of all the CEOs I've ever worked with. He is he was a unique character. I mean, I have I always say that, even though I've tried it, but I never want to be a CEO because I can never be as good as him. It's as simple as that. And I actually told him that too. It's like, he was just such an amazing character, also with his perspective on innovation, right? And what he actually wanted to achieve. He was never wavering on these things, right? Of course, when you lose that support, out of things because, he has other things to worry about, you need to declare defeat at some point, right? But that's a circumstantial thing. Is it true that it would have gone better if he, I wish, he would have been alive, not for my sake or the innovation center's sake, but for his and his family's sake. But that's a futile discussion to have. But I want to add one more point, which I think is maybe, we as leaders in this space, either new leaders or, older leaders who've been down this path many times. I just want to make sure we understand one thing as well. What was the special thing about the scale of Safaricom Alpha and the range that Bob had sort of allowed for? The special thing was that it was, to the best of my knowledge, the first time that a Kenyan corporation committed. Actually, the plan was, when you look at what the business case was saying, it was actually a fairly substantial amount of money. So innovation is always costly, right? It takes patience and it costs a lot of money. And, I live in, close to Munich right now in Germany. When you look at it, 15% of our trade, so we trade more things to the outside world that are R&D driven, that are innovation based in the United States. Many people don't know this, right? So Germany is a deeply R&D driven thing. The United States is deeply R&D driven, not because they are so rich, because you get a lot of tax incentives to do so, right? Mm-hmm. So the Kenyan government is not giving anyone a break on taking their own investments and putting them into the corporation to help innovate, right? Because in Kenya and pretty much all, I'm not sure exactly how it is in South Africa these days, but I think the notion that R&D and innovation centers and all that actually value the exports of the nation hasn't really come down to a tax code. And that's the difference between a lot of the G countries, a lot of the OECD countries, and sort of developing countries, right? You have to unleash that at some point. You have to unleash that, right? And this is a risk that Safaricom was willing to take at that point, which was very novel. And so So you have to also look a little bit of when we talk about, failures of, of innovation centers. Look, by the way, I'm not a person who would come in and say, look, I've done everything right. The circumstances were bad. No, I screwed up a lot as the leader. I will admit to you, and I can go through this in detail after this or anytime. I can tell you 5 things, including the points that Eddie was going on about, which is including execution challenges that we had in the team that I'm not going to blame on Safaricom or the circumstances. Those were, our own inefficiencies and our own things. We had a challenge finding experienced leaders outside of, Chico, but you can't just have one, who could actually drive development. We tried certain things at Safaricom, like Bonga, which I think, I also made some bad technical decisions, where we should have maybe reduced the complexity of the problem in the first go. And of course, then there's all the environmental stuff, but we made a lot of mistakes too. I don't think they were the fatal blow, but they were essential for us to, for example, not be able to kind of scale the things that we started fast enough, right? But we also need to talk at some point about the governmental responsibility, the institutional infrastructure that does not exist in Kenya, to actually entice corporations to invest into themselves, to produce product and IP that can then act as exports. Mm-hmm. Right? That's a very, very important thing, because that's why the Microsofts and IBMs and Googles of the world can do a lot of these things.
Mm-hmm. Very, very good point. Very valid point. And I think it's starting to happen. Especially now, I'm using my knowledge of what is going on at the Kenya Innovation Agency, Kenya National Innovation Agency, where guys have started talking about commercialization of innovation and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's starting to happen, but as everything in it's slower than what you want it to be. So let's see how that goes. So I want to Wangari mentioned I think it was Grace actually. Both Grace and Wangari talked about collaboration within the ecosystem and also competition. And I think there used to be a term called a co-opetition, where you cooperate when you need to cooperate and compete when you need to compete. But Grace and Ali, I know you guys have used, you've brought in people to work with in your innovation initiatives. Maybe you can talk through us on those two. Maybe we can start with Grace. How did you bring them in, and what's the best way to bring in partners, external partners, to help with your innovation?
All right. Thank you for that, Harry. The partnerships is a key element of the Innovation Center, because you want to strengthen your strengths through partners, and also your weaknesses, you want to improve in those areas that you're weak in through partners. So in your decision of partners, if you're leading the hub, which is what I did together with the people I'm working with, is looking at what are we good at and who are the partners that can help us strengthen those things, and what are these things that we are not doing very well in, we need them, and which partners can we partner with to help us in these areas of weakness. So after doing an identification of those areas, we identified the partners that we felt we could work with and approach them, including Qhala, and we had deep discussions regarding how our relationship and partnership could go along the various areas of interest that we had already identified. So I agree that partnership is really key, and you have to think about it twin in terms of strengthening your strengths and also the things that you're weak in, how do you improve them? And so you find that's much better than trying to do it yourself, because one, you become faster. if you get a partner who's better at what you do, you want to do the same thing, but there's a partner that you can get who already does that thing. So instead of reinventing the wheel, learning and maybe even recruiting and doing, the whole shebang of trying to learn a new skill within an organization, just partner, even if it is with a competitor, to create value at that level. So that way it's a win-win situation. You're able to move faster, even into the market and into whatever else that you want to do, execution, etc. Yeah. Maybe Ali can chip in on the same regarding partnerships.
So, Grace, it's interesting that Harry chose you and myself to discuss this point. So let me just give you a little bit of history that you may not also know. Historically, KQ's digital presence was built by a company called 3 Mice Interactive Media. And at some point, 3 Mice was doing, the KQ e-commerce platform for travel was doing 10% of your ticket sales at one point. We were so tight with Kenya Airways at 3 Mice that they flew us to Nice in France to learn the payment platform. So I can say for free that we implemented the first payment platform, like early 2000s. Right? We launched in conjunction with Robert Wakaba, who was the e-commerce manager then at Kenya Airways. We launched the first digital global campaign for any airline in Africa. Super successful, with geotagging and all sorts of things. So, we come from a history of collaboration, seamless integration. We even created terms at 3 Mice. We had implants and nothing to do with implants of the nicer parts of the human anatomy. But actual implants in organizations at East African breweries, at Kenya Airways, and extremely super successful. The most interesting thing out of that relationship between Kenya Airways and 3 Mice is that Kenya Airways then decided to poach half of our staff and create their first e-commerce department. And guess what? We rolled with the punches and we were like, you know what? We have our people in there. So instead of complaining, we said we'll get more business out of Kenya Airways. Fast forward to today, sitting on the board of Longhorn Publishers and driving the digital transformation at the board level at Longhorn. Interesting journey. My experiences way back, in the late 90s to early 2000s have really come to bear working at that board level. But let me assure you one thing. My good friend Moses Kamibaro, who we used to work with at 3 Mice, coined this word, CADIT. You guys have heard of CADIT? COVID-assisted digital transformation. COVID has been a silver lining for a lot of companies. Longhorn not being one of them. Driving transformation is not easy. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's not about technology. Let me just repeat that 2 times again. It's not about technology. It's not about technology. It's culture. It's friction. It's chaos. And, to Kamal's point and Eddie's point, let me just add one. It's something else around friction. Guess what? If you don't have friction, you don't have movement. It's as simple as that. So we engaged, I can't talk about the details of the engagement in detail at Longhorn because currently ongoing strategic alignments and engagements. But what I can say is that we engaged a venture builder and we built an edtech platform in 3 months. In 3 months, so more. And I can tell you, it's a world-class product. For the first time at Longhorn, we are looking at EdTech, not even from a Pan-African perspective, from a global perspective, right? Big, hairy, audacious goals are something that we must ingrain into our DNA. M-Pesa is a global product. M-Pesa is a product that is bigger from a brand equity perspective than the mother brand. But at some point, as Africans, we start getting afraid of our own shadows, and we start holding back, so eventually what we should do, let me just rephrase that, not eventually, now, we should look at innovation as a journey, not as a product, not as something that you churn out products or ideas every 2-3 months, but something that is transformational. Let me say one last thing, Harry, before I hand that back over to you. One of the most critical things about innovation is that it absolutely has zero respect for corporate culture, for corporate plans, for corporate objectives, or for pet projects at the C-level or at the board level. Let us just dispense with the wishy-washiness that we think around innovation. If you have a situation, and I think Eddie put it very well, I do not believe Vuma is a failure. I believe Vuma is being held back. And I'll tell you something else. And this I'm talking about from a whole financial services ecosystem. FinTech is my first love, so I must talk a little bit about that. If you look at M-Pesa today, and you look at all the mobile banking platforms, guess what? M-Pesa has achieved something so phenomenal, it should worry banks. This product is the cornerstone of their mobile banking strategy. I mean, surely, guys. Two of the most important, successful products in the banking service, in the banking sector. Number one, KCB M-Pesa. Actually, 3. Number 2, M-Shwari. Number 3, Fuliza. What's the common denominator here?
M-Pesa.
What's the common denominator? M-Pesa. Let me just ask everyone in the banking sector, and this is not the first time that I've said this. I'm notorious for saying this, and I will continue my notoriety. It is fine to have frenemy status. It is fine to have that friction. It is fine to have partnerships, but it is not fine to latch on your whole digital strategy to a competitor. My friend, one day utawachwa kwa mataa.
Okay, I want you to leave it there. Can you leave it there?
I have left it.
Thank you. Okay. We are not going to watch the people in the matter today. So, what I want to do, I want my panelists. You see, Ali is drinking water. I want my panelists to take a breather, stretch a bit. So we give them 5-10 minutes. I think 10 minutes. But while that is happening, I want you in the audience to actually do an exercise. So please, I want you to share names of exemplary corporate innovation centers that you know of in Kenya or in Africa or in the world, and tell us their success. Or if you can't think of any, just tell us what you think about innovation centers, corporate innovation centers in Kenya. Just type in the chat, but also I want you to also start putting down your questions, because when we come back, we're going to do a Q&A with our panelists. So start putting your questions in the Q&A tab. I'm sure you guys are zoomed in, so you know where the tab is. So just type in questions that you want the panelists. You can direct it to any panelist. Then we'll take those questions when you come back. So it's 16:23 here. Kamal, I don't know what time you're on, but it's 16:23 here. So we're going to be back at 16:33. Thank you very much. Enjoy your cup of coffee. also ask some questions. So Jack is in the house, but Jack is camouflaging as Shiko Gitao. So Jack, are you still in? Jack Ngare?
He might have dropped off Ali. I mean, Harry.
Okay, okay.
Harry, I was wondering what happened to Jack. Was he afraid we were going to ask him some hard questions about FinServ? Yeah, I'm going to take him to task. Yeah? Eddie and Kamal.
I think Jack is still there. Ali, I think Jack
Kamal face. Where is he? Let us see his face, because we are burning to hear him.
Kamal and I took the brunt. We took a hit.
Yes.
Sorry, guys. That's what Shiko paid me for. So.
Or is Jack masquerading as Carol Moyberry?
No. Okay, so I think we'll just proceed. If he comes in, we'll give him a few minutes to contribute to this discussion. Very interesting discussion, very interesting points, perspectives. So we'll go straight into our Q&A, and there's this is not in the questions, but it's in the chat. I thought I should just bring it out. There's let me see if I can find it. Yeah, from Eman Atwa. So Eman is saying address regulation, that's CBK, as a big challenge for banks, especially on things innovation. Worked for a bank for 2.5 years, and in all the time, all the applications were made to CBK for new innovative products. None got approval to launch. Opted to focus on other markets or internal processes innovation, which are of lesser value, to be honest. I know, Wangari, I can see you smiling. So I think, Wangari, you can take that, and then Eddie, if you can add on to that as well. Okay.
I mean, I don't have the answer to that, but I agree, like, there's a big problem, like, in terms of our regulator. There needs to be a bit more focus, pressure to them to allow banks just to innovate better. I mean, I think if the regulator was a bit more relaxed, sorry about that. My assistants, we'd be looking at more like neobanks. Like more neobanks would have started up. I saw there was a question about because banking's broken, especially like in Africa, it's just completely broken. But without the regulators stepping up and actually being innovative and people challenging them, we're just going to be stuck in this lack of innovation in the banking space. Because I do believe banks can be very innovative, like just seeing what banks out there have been able to achieve. Yeah.
Eddie?
Yeah, I saw that question, and I think the topic of regulation, you know, I really feel and hear that comment from the audience. You know, even in the banking, in the banks that I worked for, you know, I did quite a number of letters for product approval for no objection. But I want to say three things. But before I say this, we got some very good news last week from the Central Bank of Kenya. We got our license to do money transfer, money remittance from Kenya. So we become technically, I think, or believe, the first fintech in Kenya to have a license under the Monetary Remittance Act 2013.
Eddie, did you change your mic?
No, can you hear me now?
Yes, but much better now. Yeah.
Well, I'll stick my face to the camera. But it took us 2 years engaging with the central bank to get that license. And I thought, you know, being in banking, it would be pretty quick, but it didn't happen. But I want to say three things, like I mentioned before, about regulation and how to tackle regulation, especially around innovation. Number one, getting a no response from central bank does not mean do not go. I think people feel that the fact that they didn't, usually central bank will not respond unless they're vehement about what you're trying to do, and they will tell you, no, do not do this. But very rarely the central bank will tell you, do not do this. What they're doing is giving you time to really think through about what you're trying to do, and sort of giving you this gray area of you to try that product. I hear I'm not audible.
We can hear you now, Eddie.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Well, and I think you need to take advantage of that no response as an opportunity to really think about the product you're trying to put in the market, and actually pilot it, and because there are questions that they will ask, and you need to be able to answer them. The second thing I want to say is there is a lot of insecurity when it comes to deal with the regulator, especially around innovation. And that insecurity stems from, oh man, this is the same guy who will shut down my license. It's fair, you have that insecurity. But in that insecurity, people are very quick. You know how people deal with insecurity. You're very quick to say, oh, I don't get a response, I don't get approval, I don't do this, I don't do this. Let me tell you, their fundamental job is to regulate, not approve you for your products. Their fundamental role is to regulate. And if you understand that perspective of the regulator and be able to answer the questions, the things that they're concerned about, you get to a favorable place like we did. And I hear what Wangari is saying. It needs to be a lot faster, a lot smoother, but this will take time, right? So even when you look at the Monetary Authority of Singapore and how they've been able to support us in getting a license in 3 weeks, and how forward thinking they are, I think, remember, the central bank is still a very government institution. For instance, communication between desks is not done on email, it's done on memos. It's a proper letter, and the guy is sitting right next to you, the guy is just across from you. But if you mention something, he says, oh, but we talked about it. He'll tell you, no, we didn't, I didn't see a memo. You have to physically write a letter to the person sitting next to you. So you have to understand it's a structural government institution whose fundamental role is to hold the stick, not to put down the stick. And when you understand that, I think, and the insecurity is there, and you have to know how to deal with insecurity when you're doing those innovation things. So you have to be confident. You have to know the product. You have to know absolutely everything they want to hear and want to know. And of course, how you deal with that insecurity is you have to talk along the grain. You have to understand, for instance, the Money Remittance Act or the Money Transfer Act or the Payment Services Act, word for word and every detail, because they are also very triggered. They're very also very structured in how they do the assessment, and they follow that policy to the letter. All you have to do is go along the grain. And I tell you, get in first with along the grain. And then once you're delivering product or service, then you can make suggestions of the new things you want to do. But first things first, get in. And this is extremely important. So unfortunately, I take a very strong different view, because we can all sit and whine about the regulator, but unless we understand how to deal with them, I think we're just wasting time. And it's taken us 2 years to get a license, on approval for a license. We've learned a lot actually from the central bank and the processes that they go through and what they worry about. It's a very political environment, but I'm not from the school of thought that we throw our hands and say, oh, throw the blame back to central bank, or you have to do things faster, you have to do all these processes to allow. Let me tell you something, and allow me to comment this, Harry. The central bank is divided into 2 sections. The banking supervision section, which is the biggest, and their role is managing the banks. And they look after also all the remittance companies, all the money transfer companies, all the Forex companies. Now, the team that is in this division, their primary focus is the banks. Yeah, that's why it's called central bank, this bank in between. The other division is the payments division. Now, the payments division only came in merely 10 years ago because of M-Pesa. And the policies that and the acts that they launched the division with was only three types of licenses, right? Till today, they've only issued one type of license, and that's the PSP license under the Payments Act. And only 3 companies are allowed to do that service. We've all tried it. We've tried it. I tried at OPay to get a license. No one gets it, right? But it's not a coincidence. Because of the oversight authority that they have, their biggest and fundamental view is risk. So they license those people who are regulated by another regulated agency called Communication Authority of Kenya. Therefore, they're hedging their responsibility on oversight with another regulator. And this is a fundamental thing. So you can't just start a platform and go to central bank and tell them I can do mobile money. You've got to really think through what you're trying to do. And I think people should take advantage of that. Get to that no response is your sandbox time. That no response is your sandbox time. But the engagement, I used to send an email every week for 2 years. Every week for 2 years.
I think Eddie.
Harry, can I say something on that?
Eddie, before you say something, I think Eddie, you need to do a masterclass on how to deal with Central Bank of Kenya. Okay, yeah, Ali, you can add.
So several things, guys. First, I'd like to humbly disagree with Eddie on 1 or 2 things. Number one, regulators of the 21st century is not just about regulating. It's about enabling the ecosystem that they're supposed to regulate. And I think this is a really important point to make. Because the regulatory environment across Africa is becoming a tough nut to crack. So that's one. They have their jobs. They have to do what they have to do. Number 2, one of the things that baffles me up to today, and I continuously talk to my friends in the banking sector, I'm like, you guys are supposed to be the most powerful lobby group in any industry in this country or in the whole continent. Why are you not more assertive? You keep on complaining. I'm sorry, Wangari. You guys just keep on complaining every day. Why are you not more assertive? What is the Kenya Bankers Association doing? Right? I mean, for crying out loud, with all due respect to everybody, the first family has interest in a bank. This is no secret. So I'm not spewing state secret here. There's no secret. And yet bankers are complaining out there. Why are you complaining? Who are you complaining to? Get over yourselves and get it done.
So Ali, I just want to
let me finish, Wangari. Okay. Let me finish, please. So that's number 2. You see, the regulator has a job to do, but I also think the regulator is constrained because he cannot create laws. So sometimes we blame the regulator, but let us create those laws to allow that regulator to be more flexible. So on that, I agree with Eddie completely. Lastly, before Wangari says anything, if bankers are complaining, PesaLink is owned by the Kenya Bankers Association. Eddie took 2 years for PesaLink operated, but for 3 years, they didn't have a license or a letter of objection from the central bank. This is PesaLink, owned by bankers. What the hell are we supposed to do in the fintech space if bankers are complaining? Come on, guys. You're our big brothers. Stop this shit, forget my French, and just get things moving. I'm not blaming the Central Bank of Kenya. No, they have a job to do. Let them do it. Us in the ecosystem, I used to blame the central bank until I started understanding the mechanics and understanding what is going on. Last but not least, guys, as the Association of Fintechs, I'm wearing my hat now as the chair of the Association of Fintechs in Kenya. We are starting to engage with policymakers, with regulators, and I want to talk about my favorite topic around how we can get hard. And I do this with an analogy about a dinner table or a lunch table or a breakfast table. You have three choices. You are either at the table having lunch, dinner, or breakfast. You are serving lunch or dinner or breakfast at the table, which means basically you have a jack, you're just serving people. The worst bit is you don't know it, but you're on the menu being eaten. You don't want to be there. Harry, asante.
Thanks, Ali. I know, Wangari, you want to do a rejoinder. Just do that quickly, then we can move to another question.
So just a quick one and a point of thought for both Eddie and Ali. The whole point of innovation is taking 2 years is not innovative. And that's the challenge we have. How do you take 2 years to approve something? What needs to happen? It needs to take shorter. And that's the whole basis of innovation, being able to have an idea, come up with it quickly, get approval, and take it to market. So telling me like 2 years is okay and keep writing emails. Yeah, I understand that that's the system, but that's what we need to challenge. That's what we need to change.
Excellent. I'm going to ask a question on top of this, but just think about it, and then we can respond to it if we have time. But has anyone? I'm just asking because this is not my space, fintech or whatever. But has anybody done a product that they took to market, then it was shut down by central bank? Don't answer, but we can talk about that. So there's another question. Oh, before we go to this other question, Kamal, do you see regulators in Europe or in the US? Because I know you've done a lot of work in Europe, in US as well. Do you see regulators doing similar things to what is happening in Kenya, for instance? Or have you dealt with regulators out there at all?
No, I have, and look, I think I think that there's the frameworks are slightly more mature, right? They've been around longer, and it's a difference in terms of also the maturity of the bureaucracy and the people who work there, right? So you can't, here let's say a mid-level government employee who's been working in a particular regulatory, office, they take pride in their jobs. They've been there for a long time. They survive every kind of political party because they're not political appointees. They are very knowledgeable in their system, and you can seek a conversation upfront to do this, right? And so the barrier to entry is more transparent, and I think that's the main issue, right? It's the transparency sometimes, and the transparency, and how much will people be forgiven if you don't take permission, right? So freezing somebody's bank account could be a serious personal risk to you when you're trying to do something that may potentially violate an existing regulatory system versus somebody coming to you and saying, I think we need to talk because this is not exactly the way how it should be, are two very different things, right? So I think it's, see, this is not because people here are, it's just the bureaucracy in Germany is just more evolved.
Okay.
Right, that's it.
Yeah.
But there is bureaucracy, a lot of bureaucracy. Don't try. But I just want to share this. I remember when I came back and I was trying to set up a business here. I had this conversation with a lady from the office that was giving the business number. And at some point, when I was not complaining, but I was getting a little bit unnerved, she told me something really interesting. So she asked me, so how long have you been away from Germany? I can tell you've been abroad for a long time. I said, about 20 years. And she says, okay, let me reintroduce you to Germany. The way how it works is that if you follow the process, it will come to a conclusion, just in the way how we described it to you. The one thing you cannot do is you cannot accelerate the process. When I tell you it takes 3 weeks, it will take 3 weeks. So what you have to do is you have to develop the patience. Don't call me. Don't call anyone. It's not going to make a difference. Just develop the patience and trust the process, right? And since I have done this, and I found that very kind of that woman to give me that advice, since I have done this, I got to appreciate the bureaucracy. When you are 20 years younger than me, you probably hate it because it can get fast enough, right? But when you're at my age, I'm like, okay, forget about it, out of your mind. Oh, the letter comes. Perfect. Right here, everyone sends letters to your house, right? The letter has come, you do it.
Okay. Trust the process.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a question from Jason Masai. What is the panelist view on emergence of fully digital neobanks like Revolt, Monzo, etc. Within the Kenyan context? Possible, or do we have them already in the shape and form of Mshwari and KCB M-Pesa?
Or way beyond that, right? I mean,
Anybody who wants to take that?
I'm serious. No, I would like to ask all the people here, don't you think you're already beyond that neobank business? If I look at the neobanks here in Germany that are getting hundreds and millions of dollars on investment, if I look at the Kenyan ecosystem in terms of what it actually has from banking, it's a joke. I mean, Kenya is, I mean, look at what Eddie was talking about, and sort of his history. Like, and I've been following him quite a bit, and I like your beard, by the way. So, there's one innovation after another, and here all they do is that they have a digital bank on some old platform that has existed for 20 years that even I know, and then they give you a credit card. Okay.
Great. Can I just jump in here, Harry? I completely agree with Kamal. First, forget it. I mean, I think we sometimes get mesmerized by all these buzzwords. There's no bank in this country that has a banking offering that does not include M-Pesa. I'm back to that conversation. Tell me which one? Hakuna. I'm back to that conversation. Let me tell you how interesting it is. I open internet banking platform for Bank X, and I scroll down. I want to transfer money. I scroll down to the different banks that are available. Guess what? Smack in the middle of it, there's M-Pesa. So, de facto, in this country, M-Pesa is a bank. I know Safaricom guys, Sitoyo, and the rest of them don't want to hear this. But by all intents and purposes, it is a bank. Period. Not only is it a bank, but it is the only viable pipeline in this country for transfer of money. Let me tell you how interesting it is. And we were discussing this the other day in a group we have on WhatsApp, the Digital Disruption Caucus. And I love to have these conversations with banks. This is with bankers. This is the friction that my brother Eddie and Kamal talk about. And I'm like, you guys, let me ask you a question. My mother, my late mother, or my father, when they are on the internet, and you have a drop-down menu telling them, choose Swift, RTGS, PesaLink, M-Pesa. Forgive my French. What the hell is that? What are you telling them? Who cares whether it is RTGS or PesaLink or whatever other name you want to come up with? I want to transfer money, period. You choose the pipe you want to choose, whatever. So we have, to Kamal's point, we are talking about neobanks and we haven't dealt with the basics. Can we deal with the basics?
Okay, hold it there. So I want to bring in Neil S. And Neil says, I have to agree. TransferWise just raised new funding, and as a person living outside of Kenya, I was amazed to see that I could send money via my Neobank account to M-Pesa in 10 minutes. So interesting. Okay, so there's another question from Matilda. What should innovation centers focus more on? Getting funds or building exemplary and viable products for the market? In my viewpoint, most innovation centers, especially in Kenya, are underfunded. And to bring out good innovations, you mostly need to put in considerable amount of money. What is the leveraging point? Anybody can take that.
Can I answer? Can I answer that second? Could you just repeat it again? It wasn't very clear, but it sounded quite interesting.
Okay, so is it the funding bit?
Yeah. Okay. So why do we have to have an or? How about just saying funding an innovative product? You want these guys to eat what? You want these guys to operate how? You've got to put, as corporates, we've got to put our money where our mouth is. You see, when you're starting to think how many products are going to come out of this innovation center, or is the innovation center aligned to our corporate objectives? If it's aligned to your corporate objectives, then why do you need an innovation center? Why don't you just hire a chief strategy officer and let him or her strut around your corporate offices, telling people how nice it is to be innovative? It's about friction. It's about doing the unusual. And guess what? You've got to put money at it. Almost literally, you've got to throw money at it. Mm-hmm. And I know this is not something that is popular for executives who are always looking at the bottom line, who always have to answer every quarter to investors. But you know what? Storytelling here is what comes to mind for me. Very important. As a CEO today, you've got to be a great storyteller. Amazon convinced its investors not to ask for dividends for 20 years. 20 years. Ishirini. Miaka ishirini. Our investors here today, if you visit AGMs in this country, yeah, you've got what are known as professional shareholders who come to make life difficult for executives and board members. And most of the things they're asking for is dividends. Mbona dividends zetu hazikukuja leo? Mbona hatukupata umbrella? How come we have not been offered lunch? Those are the things, those are vitu kwa ground now. Those are the things that executives have to live with. But let me tell you one thing. Even those guys appreciate a good story. We must learn to tell the story of capital appreciation.
Great.
And that's a long-term conversation. Thank you.
I think there's another point to this, Harry, which I believe is important, is that sometimes it's not so much about the funding, but the organizational construct as such. Think about it this way. How much does a full-time equivalent cost, right? So, okay, in Innovation Center, you want to hire people who have a certain background depending on what your innovation is in. You want to have some industry experts, and you put, let's say, a team of 5 or 10 people together, and you let them do. It's not going to hit your balance sheet dramatically. Don't make them the highest paid members of your company, right? But give them enough freedom to actually create something. Now, in larger organizations, this is exactly how it sometimes happens. Give you one example that I know from my God knows how many past this is in terms of employment. But I used to work for IBM Research. And when I started my career at IBM Research in their main headquarters in New York, you had these people who I knew. I'm a theoretical physicist by training. I knew them from my textbooks, right? These were like, the coolest thinkers around, quantum computing. And so if you think about the hype around quantum computing today, you might think that, for the last, 50 years, IBM must put in hundreds and billions of dollars into quantum computing. It wasn't like that. There was a team of maybe 5-10 people who were sitting in this one end of the building in Yorktown Heights, and IBM just kept them around. Why? Because they said, eventually something will come out of it. May not be today, may not be tomorrow. Maybe one of these guys will get a Nobel Prize. It'll be good for the company, it will be good for the organization. Let's just keep them around. And then all of a sudden, literally within a year, right, you wake up one morning and boom, the government comes in with hundreds of millions of dollars of investment. This is the future. You build the first quantum computer, you put them on the cloud. The entire world's associated with you. And all of this because they just kept people around for quite some time, right? Okay, now this is a big business and they spent like $6-7 billion on R&D, but scale that down, right, to a handful of people and put them on the payroll. It's not going to break the bank. It's not going to bring KQ down, right? It's not going to bring, anyone down. It's not going to bring Safaricom down, and let them be. Let them be. And once in a while, they will create the tension that I was talking to before. And that's when you want to hit it, right? That's when you want to say, okay, now flip this. This is enough tension. Now let's flip this. Let's make it productive. Let's bring it down.
Excellent. Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you very much, Kamal and Ali, on that. So I think I want to sort of slow down, and I want to, because we've actually run way ahead of time. So I want us to just wrap this up, and I'll ask my panelists to take how many are you? 30 seconds. To just give your closing remarks, then I will hand over to Shiko, who will do the closing. So maybe I start with you, Grace.
All right, thank you, Harry. I just wanted to add on to that discussion about funding. And
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say that Africa has been lauded for frugal innovations. Yeah, so I think the fact that we may not have as much money as others have to innovate is also an innovation challenge in itself, What can we do differently to still innovate with the little that we have, even as we expect more? So even with our innovation hub, we've had to really think around that we don't have funds, but there's still things that we can do with our own limitations,
Yep.
So that is a challenge itself. But what are the creative and innovative ways we can do with the money that we have and to bring more money or still get stuff done without spending a lot? Yeah, so that would still be my parting shot. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you very much, Grace. Thank you. Eddie?
I'll let the ladies go first, no?
I'm the chair, so I decide who goes first.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I think parting short, I think everyone's right. Funding is important. We raised $2. If you look at West Africa, a lot of the fintechs, they're not on positive cash flow. They've not really done anything much. They got a piece of tech stack and they're raising hundreds of millions of dollars. We're only raising in East Africa $2. But also there's something to learn about that. And what Ali said, the narrative that you capture about what you're trying to do with your business model, whether it's marketplaces, on-demand services, or fintech, whatever it is, being able to tell that story very, very well is something we rely on people like yourself, Harry, to be able to put the story out there, because that's what investors want to hear. That's what investors want to listen to. Mm-hmm. And I equated to what Kamal said on being able, that's what investors are doing. They're just putting money in this team, and this, they may have nothing, but something's going to come out from this team in a couple of years, in 3 years, 4 years, whether it's short tail or long tail. And guess what? They flip it, and it's better than any bank returns. If they would have gotten if they put that money in the bank. Funding is important. We need a lot of funding. We need to rethink about funding even locally in Kenya. We got funding from Africa and Asia. Most of it is coming from West. I welcome everyone to listen to a podcast called All In on Spotify. Get to understand how ideas get funded and how it's important for them to get funded so that they actually turn into profitable businesses. I welcome everyone to be an entrepreneur. Give it a try. Just stick with it.
Thank you. Ali?
For me, just to re-emphasize alignment between innovation and growth. Just to re-emphasize, it's not necessarily about your strategic direction right now. Guess what? I almost can guarantee you that when Safaricom was set up, they never thought they would become the de facto rails for the financial services. It was never in their business plan. I can tell you that for free. It was never. But because they focused and they invested and allowed serendipity to take place. That's what innovation is all about. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you. Wangari?
Cool. So I guess my parting shot, just to bring it back to the topic, I really believe that innovation in the corporate space is very, very possible. You need to embrace it and love it. And usually love is just never enough. There's a lot of other ingredients that you need to put in there to make it successful, but it's definitely possible. Consistency, as some of the members, panelists have also mentioned. But yeah, very possible. And yeah, I'm still hopeful.
Thank you. And Kamal?
Well, I want to say one important thing. When I was looking at the invitation list, thinking, there's a panel of 6 who've been deeply involved with innovation in Kenya, and I'm the only one who is sort of from the outside, but on and off, so to speak. But there's one important thing, though, right? It's still 6, and we could probably add another 6, maybe another 10 even, right? Who've had experience working with, some really great companies that exist in Kenya, and each one of them has tried one model or another. I can assure you that even in countries like South Africa, you won't see that same engagement. So I just want to leave, the attendees and this great panel with this thought that, I will always think of the work that I have done in Kenya and the work that I'm soon, can't talk about it yet, start again in Kenya, is some of the best things I have ever done in my career. And when I look at just this panel, what you guys are up to, and the innovation ecosystem in Kenya, it's second to none. You always have to remember, whatever you do, you may be driven over by the bus in your own corporations. Brace yourself. You may not get the credit, but you're going to, for the younger ones here, for Ali, it doesn't matter so much anymore, right? He's already beyond that, right? Harry, Ali, and I are already out there, right? So, but for the younger ones here, you will build up your resume, you will build up these experiences, and at some point you will hit exactly that point where all of this will be part of your story. And that story will just, I think, change the way how Kenya will work. And I think, just observing for me the last 10 years that I've been sort of around Kenya and Africa, it's just remarkable. So let's keep that in mind. A lot of shit fails, but let's keep in mind what has been achieved. And I think what has been achieved in Kenya, and I say this somebody who deeply misses the country, I can assure you, this is something you all should be very, very proud of. And I'm proud of it too.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kamal. We miss you. I think you need to come back very quickly.
We'll be very soon.
Okay, great. Thank you so much to my panelists and to you, the participants to this webinar. I can see a lot of people here that I know. I can see Anita Chege, Elkana, Emma, Felix Muturi from my office, Florence, Buana, thank you, Haron, Ian, thank you so much, guys, for being part of this webinar, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, because I did enjoy this, and I think I've learned a lot. I won't even try to summarize anything, so I'm going to now pass this on to Dr. Shiko Igitao to do her closing. Shiko, over to you.
Thank you so much, everybody. I've had so much fun. And the fun thing about webinars is all the side chats that are happening everywhere. I can guarantee you there are all these side chats happening and everybody's agreeing or disagreeing or oh my God, that is so true. Somebody has said that loudly. So it is amazing having this. So I was telling the team, actually, I didn't come up with the idea of this. And people actually think it's me, Shiko, who came up with the idea of this webinar. It's the team that came up with the idea of this webinar. They said, why don't we bring all the innovation leaders together and have this conversation around corporate innovation? Because we get a lot, every 2 weeks or so, we get somebody, a corporate, coming to us and say, can you help us with innovation? Can you help us set up our innovation centers? Do you think it's going to work? Because that's the biggest question. And because I did work for Alpha, and everybody's like, if Alpha didn't make it, do you think we are going to make it? So for me, my answer is usually yes. I mean, Grace is here to actually tell you. I say yes, and because it's the circumstances and the context that works. Yeah, I was telling the team what we should have branded this panel is what to expect when you're expecting. That book, when you're giving birth, if you're a parent, you should be able to have that book. It's called What to Expect When You're Expecting, for innovation leaders, so that whenever you want, if a corporate ever comes to me and asks me, is it going to work? I'll just send them the YouTube channel, YouTube video for this. So thank you so much. I mean, I would not have summarized or put it in a different ways. Anybody who I've spoken to about innovation will know I've told them that it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. You have to embrace not being liked. If you just like being liked, it's going to be hard. The only people who need to like you is your team. Everybody outside your team might not like you. And what I loved about what Kamal said is the tension that you create. So I think it's Harry, you asked a question that nobody answered. Has there been a product that was shut by central bank? Yes, we had a product that got shut by central bank, but it came to live again. I mean, 2 years later, it came to live again in a different format, but we had it out, but we had broken so many rules. And that's what I liked about what Eddie said. Don't wait for that go ahead by the regulator. It will stop you from thinking. You'd rather have it and then just be informing or educating the innovator, the regulator, because some of the things that we did were breaking every single rule of central bank and communications authority and everybody in between. But guess what? It started a conversation that got some of those products launched. Even one of those products I'm talking about was launched this year because we tried out something new. So I'm really excited about this. Thank you so much for being part of our panel. Also, of course, follow Qhala. We do this every last Friday of the month. We do a panel with an interesting discussion. I'm happy that Harry, you expanded this to Africa. We have people from across Africa actually joining because some of those questions come from people from across Africa joining. And I'm really excited about this panel. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kamal. Thank you so much. We have people who are just talking about you on the side chats. We have Wangari, thank you so much for being honest about what you believe could work and should work, and the hope, keeping the hope. The thing is, when you've gone through a disastrous experience, most people think you lose hope, and some people have lost hope. I've met people who said, I'll never do innovation ever again, but the goal is not to lose hope. Thank you for keeping hope. Ali, thank you for keeping it real and putting us all like on the line. Eddie, thank you so much. I mean, the story of what you've done, you should actually just do that masterclass. We will all sign up for like how to deal with central bank, because honestly, we all need it. And Grace, our baby in this innovation journey, thank you for just being available and also giving how it's working for you. And hopefully that everybody who is here is able to do. I mean, Jack was here. Actually, he left a comment earlier. I sent him a link, then he joined, and he was looking. It all looked like I had 3 Shikogitos at some point on my list. So thank you everyone for joining and just allowing to have this engagement. It is 2.5 hours since we started. We had hoped for 2 hours. So we'll have this video on YouTube in a better, once it's been edited a little bit. We'll have it out there for people, anybody who can reference it. We'll create some tidbits out of it. So thank you. And of course, reach out to Qhala for any help that you need on innovation, or if you're going through a crisis of your own. In the last group, we talked about creating a group of people who love pain, who are going through digital transformation. This one, we are going to hope builders. Innovation is about building hope of the future. So we are going to build a group for hope builders. So thank you so much, and have a lovely weekend. Please get vaccinated. If you need to get a vaccination point, we have sema.africa/vaccine points. You'll find where to get your next vaccine. Please go get vaccinated. Thank you so much, and have a lovely, lovely weekend.
Thanks, Shiko. Happy Friday, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye. ya kujifunza.